When it comes to our lives, we need to learn to laugh. I love that experience of the Zen Buddhists. They're taught that when they get up in the morning, the first thing when they wake up, they get up and get in this crouched position and then laugh just as hard and as deep as they can laugh.
Well, hello, friend. This is Heartbeat, the podcast, featuring insights taken from the more than 50 years of work done by our friend Landon. Today's episode is lifted right out of the latest update to the Heartbeat app, a course entitled The Significant 7 Keys to Fully Living.
But when we then roll it all off and we get back to our story, you may not do anything that you do not enjoy. Let's think about the role of joyful, and we'll just do it with a little bit of lightness for a few moments. You know, they say that it takes a long time to learn to laugh. And this is, incidentally, I sometimes just call laughter damage control. Joyousness sometimes can be damage control. I used to tell parents who were really into it with their children, I used to talk to them about love, and I still would. But I also now talk to them a lot about play and about joyousness, because I've found that joyfulness is harder to manipulate than love is. Love sometimes isn't all that it's cracked up to be in the wrong hands. You've heard I'm doing this because I love you, and you say, well, I could use a little less love then, if you don't mind. But if I can find this, that someone says that it takes a long time to learn to laugh. Some people say it takes 40 years to learn to laugh. And I sometimes tell these people who are still in their teens, I say, you think you know how to laugh. What they know how to do is giggle and some of that sort of stuff. But it's a little thin. Now, don't get discouraged if you're here in your teens. It's okay that your laughter is just a little thin, and just keep laughing, because you're going to learn in this process. And one of these days, after you've lived this a little bit longer, then you're going to experience deep and rich kinds of laughter. It takes a long time to learn to laugh. I was in the Chicago airport and saw a young person coming down. I usually don't like lots of buttons and stuff hanging all over me and plastered all over me. And so I've never been much to stick this on or stick that on or all of that. But I saw this young person just came down through there, and they had this great big button that said in blazing letters, "Get over yourself." And I thought, what a wonderful letter. I told that to an audience, and a school official got up afterwards and he said, "Landon, where were you when you saw that button?" I said, "I was in O'Hare Airport in Chicago." And he said to the audience, he said, "You know, Landon tries to look on the good side of things." He said what that button in that crowded airport was really saying was, "Get over yourself." Different way to look maybe at the button. I like my interpretation best. Get over yourself. And there are some of us who do need that advice, don't we? We just need to get over ourselves. As sometimes the big expression right now is, chill out, will you? When it comes to our lives, we need to learn to laugh. I love that experience of the Zen Buddhists. They're taught that when they get up in the morning, the first thing when they wake up, they get up and get in this crouched position and then laugh just as hard and as deep as they can laugh. And when I read that, I thought, I've never done that. I want to try it in the morning. First morning, I forgot it. Second morning, I remembered it. As soon as I woke up, I got in this crouched position, and I laughed just as hard and as deep and as loud as I could laugh. And I'll tell you for sure, it is one experience when you're waking up in the morning. It will wake you up from head to toes. I literally danced more lightly into the bathroom that day than I ever had before. Now, I will warn you, if you sleep with someone, you better give them a warning the night before. No telling what they'll think on the next morning. And do you know when a person becomes the difference between a laugher and a world-class laugher? Now, you see, you've got gigglers in the world, then you've got laughers in the world, and then with people who have wisdom, they get to be world-class laughers. And what makes a laugher a world-class laugher is when you can laugh at yourself. When you can laugh at yourself, you're a world-class laugher. When you can look in that mirror and laugh, just enjoy what you see, then you're world-class. We liked John F. Kennedy. One of the reasons we liked him because he could laugh at himself. It is said that on Inauguration Day, it's all over, and now they're back in the Oval Office, and he looks up at his buddies as he sits down at his desk and says, "Now what are we going to do?" I remember in Dan Rather's earlier days, remember how fast he used to be? Just rat-a-tat-tat. He slowed down since he got on the network news. But he used to be just so fast you could hardly keep up with him. And I was watching him one evening, and he just lost it and started stammering and stuttering, and he was completely befuddled right there on camera. And finally, he just looked up straight into the camera and said, "I lost my place." I thought it was one of the best moments in television history. I've always loved the character of Samuel Johnson. Marvelous, brilliant, one of the most brilliant ones to come along in recent human history. But here was a man who knew how to have a good time. He was a big man. I mean, weighed over 300 pounds. Never learned, with all his brilliance and all his writing dictionaries, never learned to tie his shoes. Never really learned how to match up his socks. Never learned how to dress. They say he was one of the sloppiest characters nearly imaginable. But he became very, very famous. And here's the great famous man is at the top of this little hill, little grassy knoll here. And all of a sudden, he begins emptying his pockets before the dignitaries and the friends, and they think, what on earth is the great Dr. Johnson going to do? And before anybody can stop him, he just lies right down on the grass and then rolls down that hill. And he got up and he said, "You know, it has been years since I've done that." The ability to laugh at ourselves. When he visited his boyhood home, now becoming a real marvelous place, he goes out there, and the people who were living there at the time, the great Dr. Johnson was going to come, and boy, they'd gotten the place all tidied up, and there was a big fence still outside, about like that, all the way around the yard. And the lady looks out the window, and on the other side of that fence, and several paces beyond, stood the great, famous Dr. Johnson. And again, he was sort of emptying his pockets and eyeing that fence. And before she could do anything, here he came, all 300 pounds, hurtling, and leaped up over that fence and just went rolling in the grass on the other side. She ran out and said, Dr. Johnson, there was a gate." And he says, "Oh, I knew there was a gate, but I used to do that as a child, and I just wondered if I still could." What's he doing? You may not do anything that you do not enjoy. This gets us back in touch with ourselves, with all of our pain and with all of our suffering, that it's never too late, you see, for us to smile and to laugh. With our friends. Friends are so important. There are people in this world who do not have a friend. It is amazing how many people there are in the world who do not have a phone number that you could call from any point on this planet at any hour of the day or night and say nothing more than to call their name and say, "I need you," and they would be there as fast as transportation would get them. That's a friend. Now, it's sometimes hard to have that. I treasure so much my friends. I have some crazy friends. I have a friend, he's a PhD and thinks he knows all this stuff, but he doesn't know very much. You know, I was sitting in a restaurant with him and pouring out my tale of woe and needing somebody to just listen and to be sympathetic to me. And when I'm through, he looks over and he says, "Landon, do you know what your problem is?" He said, "You're a loser." You're a loser. And you know, somehow it was hilarious. It was just what I needed to hear. I was with a friend in New Jersey at the Lennox glass factory because my mother was still living and she was going to come visit me, and I thought, well, I'd like to have some new dishes. And so my friend said, "Well, we can go down to this Lennox glass factory and you can get some dishes down there." And so I go down and I go in and I'm looking around, and this lady comes up and she says, "Aren't you Landon Saunders?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "Did you do a workshop called Feeling Good About Yourself over," and she named another city? And I said, "Yes, I did." And she said, "Well, I was there." And so it was exciting. And so then she said, I loved some stories that you told. And so I proceeded to tell her another story. But this is a glass showroom. And so there are all these pedestals, these mirrored pedestals with these beautiful pieces all around them. And sometimes when I talk, I use my hands. And so I'm there with my friend, and I get in the midst of this big story, and I'd make a grand gesture and probably wiped out a few $100s worth of glassware. It just went everywhere. And she was saying, oh, Landon, listen, don't worry. I do it when I'm dusting and things. And she was just doing everything in the world to make me feel better. But my friend stood there. Just kept shaking the head saying, oh, I am so embarrassed. So embarrassed. See, friends, that's what friends are for. I'd finished a workshop one night, and a part of the staff, we went out. We were in Maine, on the coast of Maine, and there's a place called Barnacle Billy's up there, which is just an absolute wonderful place to get lobster. And so we decided that we were going to celebrate, and we were going to just have us a great big old Maine lobster. And one of my friends said, Landon, I've never eaten lobster just whole like that. And you go through and you pick the lobster you want, and then they boil it and bring it out, and nothing. You have to do it all. And I said, listen, don't worry, just watch me. And I grabbed a big pair of pliers, and I grabbed that lobster and clamped down on one of that claws, and it just shot right up in the air and came right back down in my glass. And as it settled down to the bottom, he looked over at me and said, Landon, I don't know if I'll be able to do that. Now, these are important. These are important times in our lives. And in our families are important times. You may be in a family that has intelligent human beings in it, but they may not be intelligent enough to think and remember to get milk. And so you think, boy, I'm going to go to bed, and I think I'll have a nice bowl of cereal. And so you get your cereal, and you just salivating all over, and you're ready for this. And you get the utensils, and then you go to the refrigerator. And you open the refrigerator, and guess what? No milk. It's not for lack of intelligence. There are intelligent people in the house. And so then the battle starts. It's like Nasrudin. Nasrudin said to his wife one night, he said, honey, bring us some cheese, because cheese enhances the life and makes the eyes bright. And she said, Nasrudin, we don't have any cheese in the house. Oh, he said, that's wonderful, because cheese is so hard on the teeth and on the gums. And she said, well, Nasrudin, now which is it going to be? What am I to believe here? He said, well, if there's cheese in the house, believe my first response, and if there's no cheese, my second. So the next time you look up and there's no toilet paper, you'll know how to deal with that. You may not do anything that you do not enjoy doing. In the workplace, and then as we grow old, it's important to keep that sense of humor. I was thrilled to have a wonderful mentor, a number of mentors, but one of my mentors died at 96 years old. And I saw him when he was 94, and he looked at me with eyes shining and bright. And we were talking about his age, and he had just turned 94. And then with that twinkle in his eye, he said, Landon, not very many people die over 94. I didn't argue with that one. He was a gentleman that on a February morning was very, very cold, and we were going up this walk, and there was snow on the ground, and the sunshine had come out and sort of warmed that walk, and there was a little earthworm that somehow had crawled out. And oh, he was cold and bluer than normal. And my friend, through these big, thick glasses, looked, took his little hat off and tipped it, and said, my friend, you picked a mighty cold day to get out. What are we doing? We don't do anything that you don't enjoy. And then he looked at me one day and he said, Landon, look at that. He was real palsied. That hand was just going crazy like that. And he said, look at that. And his eyes shining just like a little child's. Look at that. He said, it didn't used to do that. And he said, if I think real hard, he said, I can slow it down. Watch this. And then he slowly brings it down. It's like the woman that Ken Dykewald talks about. She's 84, 85 years old, and he keeps looking at her, and there's something strange. And finally, he notices what it is. She's wearing braces. And he said, why are you wearing braces on your teeth? And she said, well, I've met this guy, and I want to look as good as I can. What are we doing? All we're doing. You may not do anything that you don't enjoy. And when I'm trying to make my trail through the world, if I learn the secret of joyfulness, I won't miss my life.
Well, if you enjoyed today's episode, it's taken from The Significant 7 Keys to Fully Living. It's the latest addition to the Heartbeat app, and the app is available on the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store, or you can find out more information by visiting thisisheartbeat.com. There are 7 lessons just like this one. This is Heartbeat, the podcast, is made possible by Friends of Heartbeat. And they invite you to visit the website, thisisheartbeat.com, where you'll find out more about the app as well as other information about Landon's work. Until next time, this is Heartbeat, the podcast.